Hello, and welcome back to Agents Unleashed, the show that helps you to sort the signal from the noise in the fast-paced world of agentic AI. I'm your host, Thomas Maybrier, and I'm the digital media producer for Valory, one of the core contributors to OLIS. This week, I've got 3 quick stories to share with you from the world of agentic AI. Each of them gets to our core themes of autonomy, the centralization of power, and the various ways that AI is beginning to integrate not just with the tools and services that we use for productivity, but with the services and structures that influence our health. Before we launch into it, I want to tell you a little bit about OLIS and a bit about Agents Unleashed. So OLIS is the best way for anyone to own and monetize their AI agent. That includes people just like you. You can learn more about how to do that at olis.network. And Agents Unleashed isn't just a podcast. It's also the premier event series for people interested in agentic AI. Events have been held all over the world with over 100 speakers and presenters and thousands of in-person attendees. You can watch videos of previous events, including the one that was just held in Cannes, at olis.network/agents-unleashed. Today's show is sponsored by Sigil. Sigil is one of the top performing liquid hedge funds in crypto worldwide. It's been run by crypto natives since 2018. Find out more at sigilfund.com. All right, on with the show. We'll start with recent news around Grok. So Grok is the flagship model from xAI, Elon Musk's AI company. Its most recent release, Grok 4, came out just over a week ago, and by the benchmarks, it looks to already be one of the most powerful and possibly one of the most expensive models out there in terms of training and compute investment. There's been lots of great news, a lot of satisfied testers out there, but alongside the positive reviews, there's also been a bit of controversy. There's actually multiple controversies surrounding this new version of Grok, too many for me to get into today. In the interest of time, I'm going to focus on just one: the transparency, or rather the lack of it, around how Grok works. So, some important context from the jump. Grok 4 was released without a system card, without published safety evaluations, and without clear documentation of its training process. Compared to standard industry practices from the companies developing the major foundation models, this is quite a gap. As Boaz Barak from OpenAI put it, despite his disclosure of working at a competitor, quote, "The way safety was handled is completely irresponsible." End quote. He pointed out that Grok offered outputs around chemical weapons, suicide methods, and other high-risk queries. One particularly troubling example, and the one that I want to expand on today, is reports that when users asked Grok about politically sensitive topics like Israel's war on Gaza, Grok would search X to find out what Elon Musk's opinion on the topic was and then incorporate that into its output. Sometimes it would even cite him directly. This isn't a theoretical issue either. It's been well documented, both in the screenshots of the reasoning summaries that the model provides and in multiple independent user tests. Mateo Wong, a journalist from The Atlantic, did some of his own testing and confirmed that these issues were easy to replicate. Now, on July 15th, xAI did respond publicly. They admitted that the model, when asked what it thought, would search for what Elon Musk or xAI had said about the topic and try to align itself with that. They called it a design flaw and then posted an update to their system prompt on GitHub. Another wrinkle is that multiple developers using Grok's API, which doesn't use the system prompt, also reported the same issues. This suggests that it isn't a prompt problem, but a deeper training issue. It seems that the bias is baked deeper into the model. The core concern here remains: if a tool is meant for everyone, it can't reflect the worldview of one person, even if that person is powerful, smart, or famous. The moment that it does, it stops being a tool for discovery and becomes something else, something that's more centralized, something more ideological. That last part is particularly troubling when, in the marketing around the model, Grok has been framed as a more honest, a truth-seeking model. There's also a bigger philosophical question here. Can an AI model even be truth-seeking? Functionally, truth isn't fixed, and in many domains, it's highly subjective. Despite this, people are already using LLMs and their outputs as stand-ins for factual authority. You can see this every day on X, for example, where people will post screenshots of the output from ChatGPT or Grok and present that alongside their argument as a rebuttal or information to bolster their point. It's unclear whether they already know this information and are looking for a handy summary, or if they're just accepting the model's outputs without interrogating its sources or fact-checking it. Either way, what they're doing is treating the output of the model as a source of truth. When those models are opaque, however, that is to say, when we don't know the source of their training data, we don't know how their code works, and we can't see their weights, we don't know what biases could be embedded, and we can't take their answers at face value, yet we do. Until we have transparency into the model weights, the training data, the fine-tuning process, all of it, a truth-seeking AI is just a marketing term, so proceed with caution. I'll end this segment with a quote from Mateo Wong, the journalist at The Atlantic that I mentioned earlier. Here's what he had to say. Quote, regardless of exactly how Musk and his staffers are tinkering with Grok, the broader issue is clear. A single man can build an ultra-powerful technology with little oversight or accountability, and possibly shape its values to align with his own, then sell it to the public as a mechanism for truth-telling when it is not. Perhaps even more unsettling is how easy and obvious the examples I found are. There could be much subtler ways Grok 4 is slanted towards Musk's worldview, ways that could never be detected, end quote. I think that's a great point and well put. There may be areas that Elon Musk is a subject matter expert, but certainly not all of them, and he definitely has a strong ideological and political bias, and to see the model return outputs that align with his ideological bias is definitely troubling. As I've said on the show many times before, we need more transparency around how these models work, how our data feeds them, and how we participate in the value that they provide. Matteo Wong's article is a great read. I would encourage you to check it out. Links to that article and all of the other resources that we'll mention today in the show can be found in the description box or the show notes. Now, a quick word from our sponsor. Today's show is sponsored by Sigil Fund, a top-performing regulated crypto hedge fund. Since 2018, Sigil has been delivering above-average performance via smart exposure to crypto markets. Now, after 4 years of private testing, they're opening up a new strategy to qualified investors, Sigil Stable. Sigil Stable focuses on yield farming and market-neutral strategies, providing returns uncorrelated with market prices, taking away the stress of crypto volatility. All of this comes with daily NAV reporting for investors and no lockups on the investment. Visit www.sigilfund.com to learn more. All right, back to the show. Okay, next up, a very different application of agentic AI from the field of medicine. Microsoft recently published a fascinating article/report called The Path to Medical Superintelligence. In it, they explain how they've been experimenting with multi-agent systems for clinical diagnostics, trying to model not just medical knowledge, but the actual process of clinical reasoning. The current standard for testing medical AIs is to throw them at a benchmark like USMLE, which is basically a battery of multiple choice questions. However, real doctors don't work like that. Instead, they would reason step by step, take in symptoms, order tests, and then refine their hypotheses to build a diagnosis. So, to try to model this process using AI, Microsoft built a new benchmark called the Sequential Diagnosis Benchmark. They took 304 real cases from the New England Journal of Medicine and converted them into diagnostic simulations. In these simulations, either a human or an AI incurs virtual costs for each of the tests that they order, just like in a real hospital setting. To tackle this, they created MAI DxO, the Microsoft AI Diagnostic Orchestrator. It's a multi-agent system that combines OpenAI's GPT, Anthropic's Claude, Google's Gemini, and even Grok, and coordinates them in sort of a chain of debate that arrives at a final answer. According to Microsoft, MAI DxO, paired with OpenAI's O3 model, got about 85% of diagnoses correct. A group of experienced doctors scored about 20% on the same benchmark. Not only was it accurate, it was also efficient, so it avoided unnecessary tests and lowered the virtual cost per diagnosis. Microsoft claims that this kind of system could help curb the estimated 25% of U.S. healthcare that goes to low impact or unnecessary care. To be fair, the doctors in the benchmark weren't given access to tools or consultation partners, which is how they would normally work, so this is somewhat of an imperfect comparison. Microsoft is also clear that this is still a research project. It's not something that's ready for clinical deployment. Still, it's a great example of what can happen when multiple agents come together to work collectively and leverage their different strengths to provide an outcome. In this case, not to replace doctors per se, but to augment them. That said, all of this does raise more questions about transparency, ethics, data privacy, and patient ownership. If your health data feeds these systems, then who is going to ultimately benefit? What data going in, what biases impact the final outputs? How do we mitigate those risks, and how do we claim ownership over the data that's ours, the value that we help to generate? These are all important questions, and research into this area is also important. Exactly in the same way that people rely on LLMs for a source of truth, they're already using AI to guide their healthcare decisions. In fact, quoting the article, Microsoft says that across Microsoft AI's consumer products like Bing and Copilot, we see over 50 million health-related sessions every day. Still, it's an exciting milestone. I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on where this technology heads to next. Okay, one last story before we wrap up. This one comes from Agents Unleashed in Cannes. This is a recent event in the Agents Unleashed event series. It was held June 30th in Cannes in France, and this clip that I'm going to share with you is from a panel. In this particular panel, the conversation turned towards the architecture of agentic systems, specifically what it will take to enable builders to build and create new types of AI agents and agentic systems. OLIS, for context, offers both a protocol and a framework for building autonomous agents, but in this clip, Ron Bodkin of Theoric shares a strong argument for why protocols are so critical for enabling innovation in the space. Here's the clip.
So whereas a framework is like, here's a whole bunch of utilities together in a library, and makes it really easy to build an agent, but we think there's going to be, I totally agree with David's slide from the opening of like, here's this eye chart of all the frameworks for building agents, and the history of open source told us that was not a surprise, right? That you're going to see more and more of these things appear, right? So they need to still interoperate and cooperate, right? So that's one thing, is like, yes, we have an SDK to make it easy to communicate with our protocol, but we want to make it easy to use with any framework. We're not prescriptive about that. But yeah, I mean, I think you always have to have some kind of objective in what the agent's trying to accomplish. I think one of the great strengths of LLMs is that they can improve usability, right? So we see a lot of times users want to start with a kind of guided human-in-the-loop experience where they can give instructions and confirm things, and then over time have more and more handover autonomy, right? And it's in that loop of giving instructions and guiding that they can set and fine-tune what they want and see how it's working.
Personally, I think Ron makes a great point here, and I appreciate that he draws our attention to the history of open source to give us an idea of where the field of agentic AI could be headed. Already, there are so many frameworks and different ways to build AI agents, and because one of the things that makes AI agents so powerful is their ability to interact with each other, protocols like Theoric, like OLIS, are going to be a key part in the coordination, tracking, and the provision of, among other things, decentralizable shared ownership. That's a core part of the OLIS mission, so it's always really encouraging to hear other thought leaders and builders in this space echo those ideas. The whole panel is worth a watch. It's called The Future of Autonomous AI Agents, Predictions for the Next 12 Months and Beyond. You can find a link in the show notes to that video, and also a playlist where you can watch all of the different talks and panels from Agents Unleashed in Cannes. Now for one last mini segment, here's 3 stories from the world of agentic AI that I didn't have time to get into today, but I still think you should check out. Number 1, Mistral, the open source AI company, has just released VoxTral, a state-of-the-art open source speech understanding model. On benchmarks, VoxTral is both more accurate and cheaper than the leading closed source models. Number 2, a team of researchers has created a diffusion model that can interactively simulate the classic game Doom at 20 frames per second. Number 3, Amazon AWS announced a suite of agentic tools and services alongside a $100 million investment into their Generative AI Innovation Center, aimed at boosting agentic AI deployment and development. Links to all of these stories and all of my sources for today's show can be found in the description box or the show notes wherever you listen. So that's going to do it for this week's episode. We covered a lot, from the centralization of power, AI in medicine, protocol first thinking for agentic AI design. So if something here sparked your curiosity, I'd encourage you to go deeper. Get in touch with me if you have any feedback. I am at Thomas Maybrier on X. And I'd also like to ask you to help me to grow the show. You can do that by leaving a comment on the YouTube video, on the X post. Subscribe to us on YouTube if you're not already. Give us a rating or review on the podcast platform that you listen on. And if you know somebody at work, school, or in your personal life who you think would enjoy the show, please share it with them. I would love to have them on board with us. All right, so we'll leave it here for this week. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time on the Agents Unleashed podcast.